G'day everyone. This is the inaugural meeting of the Access User Group for Australia, Access Express. And today we've got Greg Regan showing us some nifty things about user interfaces, in particular a control tip text that actually works. And during these Australian Access Express meetings, we'll be obviously talking about access, but I've got a particular bent towards using SQL Server, and in particular SQL Server Express, because I've mostly worked with small businesses, and SQL Server Express does that really quite nicely. So I'm going to, at this point, hand over to Greg so that he can start his presentation. Go, Greg.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Kent. Thanks everyone for joining. So today's presentation will relate to an aspect of interface design, as Kent just mentioned, namely tooltips. And Access already has built-in tooltips. So the question is, why would you even need to develop a custom tooltip? So that's what we'll cover today. Just quickly a little bit about me. I'm actually a CPA, an accountant, and I got into Access back in the 90s because I was having trouble doing monthly reporting, getting the data the way I wanted. So I locked myself in a little dark room and started to learn code and whatever to manipulate stuff. And then that took me on the start of my Access journey. But yeah, I'm basically an accountant, sort of come developer of sorts. The presentation I'll give today follows on from a talk I gave in 2023 on interface design. And there I covered multiple concepts, ideas, and opinions. And along with the positive feedback, there were also requests for code, which I really didn't get into. So Kent maybe proposed that I might take some of those concepts and turn them into short individual presentations, but go into a little bit more depth. You can go back to the presentation on screen and take a look at the start of my presentation. I explain why we as developers should be mindful of interface design and why we should be giving Access a little bit more love. So briefly, the question is design, why it's important. So we as developers, Access developers, are competing with modern web design and application design, which has taken a quantum leap this century. So almost anyone can create a great website now with off-the-shelf software. It's almost difficult not to make a good-looking website. It's hard to mess it up. And the way I see it is that's the standard now, that our solutions will be judged by, or at least partly. I mean, you've got to make a great application, but we're also being judged by the look of the application. And people do judge books by their covers, despite the saying. And clients will judge your application partly on its design. So your Access solutions don't have to look as though they are built from a Meccano set. So just a caveat, warning, disclaimer, I'm not a designer by profession, just a dude. So apply any of my design concepts at your own risk. But my message is, please put some thought into your design when you start building a new Access solution. So here's an example of what an Access solution could look like with a little vision and effort. And a typical reaction I get from users when they see an interface like this is that Access? Or what platform did you build this on? Okay, so if you can't immediately tell that it's Access, you may be winning the design battle. So my motto is Access shouldn't look like Access, or at least it shouldn't look like Access as we've known it from the past. So let's get to custom tooltips. What are the role of tooltips? Here I have a text-based interface, and obviously we have some labels within text, and the text makes the intention obvious. But maybe it doesn't look so great. It looks very busy. Here we have an icon-based interface, which looks a lot better. Of course, the question is, what do the icons actually mean? especially to a new user. That's the role of your pop-up tooltip. Good responsive tooltips can give us the best of both worlds, a visual interface, which is supported by text. And the icons that you design for your visual interface may not initially be intuitive to a new user. So tooltips can help the initial familiarization with the interface. So when we hover above an icon, the pop-up tooltip describes the intended use. And over time, the users will need those tooltips less and less. The icons will come to have meaning just with use over time. So if you look at just the sample screen we've got there, the mouse will be floating over that telephone icon, and the pop-up tooltip is describing it. So that would lead to a form which would be pending phone inquiries. Good tooltips facilitate an icon-based interface. So what's the problem? Why are we even looking at a custom tooltip solution when Microsoft Access has one built in? Well, the problem is that they're laggy and they're often not obvious. Let's look at the problem and preview a solution. What I'll be looking at today, I've got a couple of solutions to this. The one I'll be covering today is one that uses a command button as the tooltip. And maybe in future presentations, we might look at others, but we'll see. So here's a screenshot of the demo database. So we'll go and open that up now. So just give me a moment while this opens up. Yeah. Okay, here we are. Okay, so what I've got in this demo database is a mock user interface, which obviously uses icons, okay? And obviously what you'd expect is that if we've used Microsoft Access's built-in tooltip, which is the control tip text, it would pop up when we float above it. So let's take a look at the icon on the left, which is the tortoise. It'll be pretty obvious why I've used the tortoise icon in a moment. And we'll move our mouse around it. Now let's pretend that we've never seen this interface before, and let's pretend we're a user who's not an Access developer. We don't know Access. We're just opening up a solution, okay? I want to know what these icons mean. So I'm going to float above. I'm going to float above that icon. And even though I go quite slowly, nothing happens. So it's easy for me to miss the fact that I've actually got some assistance in terms of the meaning of the icon. Very easy to miss it. I'm not even going fast. I have to know that tooltip support is there. Okay, so that's the problem with the built-in Microsoft Access tooltips. So let's jump forward to the solution. Okay, so it's instant. So even if you don't mean to, if you're not looking for it, it's in your face. You've got to see it. So let's talk a little bit about quickly what's happening here. We've got an icon, obviously. It's got a mouse move event, and the mouse move event is populating the text of the tooltip, which is a command button. And we'll look at how that happens in a minute. And it's moving the command button to the icon in question. And it's resizing the command button according to the text that's being supplied to it. So it'll be wider or less wide according to, or narrower according to the text that's being populated into the command button's caption text. Okay. But we also need a way to remove the tool text when we move away from that icon. And we're not using the mouse move event of the form section here, okay? Because I don't want code running every time my mouse moves over here. So basically, when I move away from that icon, I want the tooltip to disappear and we have no more code running. So what we'll do is we'll move to the X-ray version. Okay, and what I've done with this X-ray version, same thing. I've put borders around the icon so we can see what's happening. So as I move here, same thing. I've actually got a backdrop. Now, on production version, that backdrop is camouflaged to match the background of the form section it's on. But just so that we can see what's happening, we have a backdrop which is a rectangle. We'll get into the design in a minute. We've got a backdrop which is a rectangle and it's center back, and it's going to wrap around itself around the back of that icon, so that as I move off the icon, it's going to trigger the mouse move event of that backdrop or that rectangle control. And that rectangle control's mouse move event will hide the tooltip and it will hide the backdrop itself. So why do I need to hide the backdrop? That's because I don't want it running its mouse move event. If we have a look at what we'll do, we'll just go into design mode. Design mode, we'll come into here in a second, but I'll just take us into design mode. So with the demo application, when you hit the close button, it doesn't actually close, it just takes you back to design. And we'll get into just design mode quickly. So there are our components, obviously your icons, which are just images, command button, and a rectangle. So we'll go through each of these. We'll go through each of the components now, and I'll just get out of the parent form. So just by the way, on the parent form, we're actually using a navigation control. Okay, so there's our navigation control and its sub buttons. But just to look at this, we'll just get into the subform. So what we have here is a mock-up of the working parts. So we've got a working model up here, the X-ray version. We've got a mock-up of the working parts, obviously your icon. So your icon is just an image, okay? And it's visible. Obviously, default visibility is true. And it contains the tooltip text in its tag property. So, for example, here, that icon has a tag property of pending action items. And that's what's going to be fed into the caption of that command button. And obviously, we have a mouse move event. And that mouse move event will take the display text from the icon's tag. It's going to put that into the caption property of the command button. It's going to adjust the width of the command button to accommodate the text. It's going to size and position the command button over the calling icon. And it's going to set this backdrop, this orange backdrop, around the back of the icon. And then it's going to show the tooltip. Now, the other thing to mention, I've got an orange backdrop here. Obviously, in production, what happens is that when you open the form, the back color of this rectangle gets changed to match the color of the form section that it resides on. The next thing I'll look at is the backdrop, and this is the mechanism where we remove the tooltip once we move the mouse away from the icon. So that rectangle, it's rectangle control. Its default visibility is no, and we must have it behind everything else. So its arrangement is center back. And the back color in design is irrelevant because it will be changed. Its back color will be changed to match the form section's back color also. And then it'll have a mouse move event. And the mouse move event will hide the tooltip, hide the backdrop. Let's come to the command button itself. Its default visibility is no. Its tab stop property is no, because we don't want it to accidentally get the focus. And it must be bring to front. It must be above everything else, all the other controls in the form. And ideally, what we want is that its border is contrasting to its own back color. And that makes sure that it's always visible. Doesn't matter what the background of the form is. It'll have a mouse move event. The mouse move event for both the rectangle and the tooltip will be the same. It's going to hide the tooltip and it's going to hide the backdrop. And why do we need to have a mouse move event on the tooltip? It's because we might mouse over the tooltip and escape from that. So here, obviously it disappears if I move off the icon, but if I was to move over the toolbar, I'm actually escaping from that, from the disappearing act. So that's basically how it all works. And I just basically like to check if there's, with yourselves, any questions about how it works or anything you'd like to know.
I was curious as to why the tooltip is, when I say the tooltip, the control you use for a tooltip, why is that a command button? I don't recall you using it to trigger anything.
No, I just like the design. It has nice round corners. When I add borders to it and increase the border tip size, it just rounds it off. You could use a label, I imagine. And I played with that. I just like the look of the command button. It doesn't have to be a command button.
Thank you. That's a very clear answer to the question. When you move over the command button,
Yes.
does the code behind that say, all right, they've got it over there, we don't want that, we move the command button?
Yes. Let's just move this into place. So what I'll do is I'll just manually move this into place. So what the code's going to do when we mouse over the icon, it's going to size the backdrop around the back of that icon, so that when I move away from the icon, it's got to go over the rectangle, okay? And the rectangle is going to perform the disappearing act, okay?
Right.
However, the code also, when we use that icon's mouse move event, it's going to place that backdrop rectangle so we can do the disappearing act. It's also going to show the tooltip. Now, the issue is I can escape that disappearing act if I don't have an event in the command button. I can escape that disappearing act without any event, mouse move event on the command button itself. That command button will stay there. It's not what we want.
So what do you do? I mean, I get that the unprotected drawbridge could allow forces into and out of your castle, but I would imagine, what I'm expecting you to tell me is that you have some code which, when you go over the tooltip, would actually move the tooltip such that you're no longer over it. Is that something you have, or do you do something else that would have a similar effect?
No. So the tooltip code and the backdrop code are the same. They'll call the same code, which is to make both the backdrop disappear and the tooltip disappear. Because what's actually happening is, as we want the tooltip to disappear as we move away from the calling icon, and the disappearing act will not happen. And so basically, if I just do this now, that tooltip would stay there visible because the mouse move event of the rectangle has not been called. But I mean, obviously, if the code placed it like this, it'd be fine. But that's less obvious which tooltip, which icon the tooltip relates to. So I personally kind of like a position like that. But so we need the disappearing act to happen on the mouse over the tooltip itself, and also what I call the backdrop or the rectangle control.
Yes, I get that. Crystal's got a question.
Hi, Greg. Very interesting. Although I don't understand why you need the backdrop.
Okay, so this tooltip, the command button, disappears as we move away from the icon. So my question to you is, how would you solve that? Let's forget about the backdrop. How would you make that tooltip disappear when we move away from the icon?
Well, I haven't really looked at what image can do, because images, well, they can't take the focus, and I haven't explored the mouse mouse over properties.
Yeah.
But you're using a rectangle.
Yeah.
So I'm just not seeing why you need that, why you can't just use the image itself. Does the image not have the control you need?
That image, but there's no event if I move away from that to actually make this happen. So I need a mouse move event from something else. And that's what the backdrop does. It positions itself behind that icon so that now as I move off the actual image itself, it's got to spill over onto the rectangle, and the rectangle's mouse move event will then be triggered.
So the backdrop is just slightly larger than your image and
Yes.
all the
Yes.
directions.
So
Oh,
actually in
well,
development, it's going to look like this. Doesn't matter what shape, whatever, because the code is going to call it to position itself slightly above, slightly left, and then let's do this slightly wider and slightly taller so that it surrounds the back of the calling image. And now as I move away, and because the rectangle is set to center back, it's at the very back of everything else. While I'm floating above the icon, the rectangle's mouse move event is not being called. But as I move away from the icon, it's got to cross over, it's got to hover above the rectangle, and the rectangle's mouse move event will then perform the disappearing act.
So you could use the sections mouse
Correct.
move, but that
That's
would
what I
keep
thought.
firing whenever you keep moving your mouse. As the
Yes.
rectangle's only going to fire once and
Yes. And
hide itself,
disappear.
so it can't fire again.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to. So it's just not a good solution. So the way is to position a rectangle behind the icon, wrap it around the back, let its mouse move event fire once, and then actually become invisible.
I would offer another set of feedback for that backdrop, and
Yep.
that is that it allows you to actually highlight the button that the tooltip applies to. I struggled with that in your first demo there because you popped up a tooltip there, but you did it on right above the next button. And I was struggling to determine which button it applied to. So
Okay.
if you can actually use the color to highlight the button.
It'd be nice if it had like a sort of thin border or something. You would probably, now, because I want, if we go into the X-ray version, I actually want, yeah, I mean, actually, you could actually just put a border around that backdrop, because actually in production, the actual back color of that rectangle matches the back color of the section, right? But you could have a nice little border, and that would be really nice nice way to highlight. What I actually did here is I put a little bullet point on the tooltip, so it kind of indicates which icon it's actually floating above. So as we come, and the reason I do that is because as we come over here, if the tooltip would actually spill over off the edge of the parent, so this blue frame represents the frame of the navigation control subform. If that tooltip with its text would actually spill off scene, because now it's kind of left justified, it needs to flip back. So which icon are we referring to? So I use that bullet point there. But your idea is quite nice, actually. That would be really subtle and really pretty cool.
In this instance, you've got transparent backgrounds in your images. So
Yeah.
you see the background through the image. But if you didn't have transparent backgrounds on your images, you'd still see a little border around it.
So my images are PNGs, which can have a transparent portion. But if that orange border, so the back color of that rectangle would match this form section, but it could just have a very thin, subtle border that would display, as Bill says. So yeah, I think it's a really good suggestion.
So we haven't really gone into the coding of this, because I think it's all pretty basic stuff that we'd all know how to do. It's the technique that we're really interested in more than the actual code. So,
Yeah.
But if there's anything anyone wants to actually see, just ask. But I think we can all figure out how to do this.
Yeah. So Kent and I had a discussion, and because I had a PowerPoint and it was going right through the code, and we realized that once we explain the technique, we don't really need to go in the code. We all know how to hide things. It's more about the the magic is more in the planning of how this is going to work rather. I mean, one thing I could just, Kent, would you like me to demonstrate the more sophisticated solution?
Yes, that was what I was about to suggest.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back into solution. So what we've done, what we're looking at today is this simple solution which uses that command button. Okay. And there is another fancy version which I have, and I'll quickly talk about the pros and the cons of using that. First of all, the advantage of using this is that you have all the controls in Access. You have a command button, right? You have a rectangle, pretty easy. This one actually has a call out. Actually, so it looks a bit fancier. And this with the call out makes it pretty obvious which icon it's pointing to. Now, the disadvantage of that is this call out is actually multiple parts, and it involves images which you've got to develop. So just say you take the demo database and you want to use this red and white call out for your interface. The colors might not match. You've got to go and actually make up your own call out images. So let me just, let's go back to development. I'll go into that. I'll just show you quickly what I'm talking about. What I mean is that there are multiple parts to this, and the code's a little bit more sophisticated. So you've got an image, which is a cap or a cap, depending which way the call out points. Got a pointer, two different pointers, again, depending which way the call out points. You've got a label to take the text, and you've got an image backdrop, which is behind there. So it's got all these sort of moving parts, or not moving parts, but components. And that is actually an image, right? You can't actually change the color. Command button, you can just change the color to match the coloring of your interface design. But so that's the disadvantage. Now, what I'm trying to do is just have a form that's got all different color callouts, and you can copy and paste them onto your design if one of those sort of color schemes matched. But that's the more sophisticated version. Of course, the methodology is pretty much the same. You're measuring the width before you put this all together, making sure that it doesn't spill off to the right edge of the subform, etc. But that's the more sophisticated option. But I like the simple option just because you have all the components there already. And with the new suggestion from Bill and George, that highlighting, it's going to be pretty obvious what icon you're floating above.
Actually, there's one little bit of code that isn't particularly obvious, and that is the setting of the width of the command button according to the amount of text it's trying to display. And you're using Whizhook to do that, aren't you?
Yeah, correct. So
so Whizhook is a little undocumented feature.
Yeah.
Colin Riddington has a web page which does document a lot of the things that are available in Whizhook.
Yeah, and you need some little secret code for it and everything. So there's the I don't understand the thinking when this was thought up, but you need the special key to make it to actually activate it. And then there's a Whizhook's property, which is TWIPs from font. Okay, so it takes the control and basically, so basically you put in your control, and it comes out with a width for you, and based on the font, and that's what we're using to resize the width of the command button so that it matches the actual text that's being fed into it.
Greg, your code, as far as I can see at least, doesn't actually say what Whizhook is. It doesn't instantiate. I mean, it gives it a key, and that's good, Crystal. It gives it a key, but it doesn't so much define how we get into Whizhook. I mean, it says initialize, but do you have to have a reference to Whizhook?
Good point.
There's nothing. It doesn't say what Whizhook is. It's not
Right.
application thing. So I'm
Yes.
wondering, I would have thought it would have to have something.
It's a
Yes.
little insider secret for those of us that are in the know, Adrian.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.
Right. I'm actually thinking. I'm actually going to search right through the code because I can't remember because I've sort of had this going for a long time. It looks like I'd say no. I think you just refer to Whizhooks in the key.
Cannot jump to Whizhook because it's hidden. Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful. You might be able to say, oh, it says members of globals. Go in here. Right, there's show hidden members on that list.
So, okay.
You
where
just
is
created
that?
you just created a right-click menu.
Yep.
Right-click.
Yep.
Now, one of the options there, show hidden members.
Okay. Yep.
So application.whizhook. So Whizhook is a property of the application.
Yeah.
Object.
So let's go back to our code. So what would happen if we said application dot
Google
Whizhook?
says
So yeah, you can say
That is the same.
application.whizhook or just Whizhook and you'll come up with the same thing.
It's a property of application, but it's a
Yeah.
hidden one.
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. That's
Yeah.
it's handy to know.
Yeah.
And not all the Whizhook functionality needs the key.
Indeed not.
Yeah, like sorting doesn't, but some of them do, some of them don't. I guess it doesn't hurt to specify it, but it's not always necessary.
It's the important things that we know where Whizhook comes from, and more importantly, that if someone wants to follow in your footsteps, what they need to do is absolutely nothing other than what you've got here, because what Whizhook is already available to everybody who's on 2000 or later.
Yeah,
as Bill said.
Okay, so that was really about the only thing that I could think of that was in the code that wasn't immediately obvious. I did mean to put up the demo app before the meeting, but I was recalcitrant, so I will do it afterwards and give myself a good hard talking to. We also contemplated a subclassed version, but it's pretty easy for you guys to work that out. You just have a form subclass that you declare in the form itself, and then it has a collection of the image controls and the backdrop rectangle and the command button, and you don't need to have the individual events for the images.
Yeah, that'd be a much more compact way to do it, is class and subclass it.
Yeah, but we're sort of, that would be jumping too far ahead in one. Baby steps.
Correct.
I like the solution. I like the idea of that, though. It's something that does fit classing quite well. But George has a question. I wonder if it's the same one I was going to ask. Go for it, George.
No. Is it possible? I mean, this works on a mouse move. Is it possible to implement in a way that would respond to an accelerator key sending focus to
Ooh, that's a good question.
control?
Because there's no mouse move.
There's no mouse movement.
On or off.
No, it's
The reason I'm
actually a
asking
really
is
good point.
We just went through a round of enhancements to Northwind. Developers and Starter focused on accessibility, and that was one of the big keys, is accelerator key.
Okay, so the thing is, here we're talking about an image control that can't actually get the focus. So it's got a mouse move, but it can't get the focus. Whereas if it was a mouse, if it was a command button, then when you use your accelerator key to go to that command button, you can also get it to raise the control tip text using the got focus event rather than just the mouse move. But because these are image controls,
I'm going to say it's an image.
Can't get focus. So
So
how do you use an accelerator, a hotkey to get to an image control? I don't think you can.
and
There's no reason why the images couldn't be replaced with command buttons. That's fine. And that way you could actually tab tab along them, and the got focus event would raise the control tip text.
It's actually easier than the mouse hovering thing, really, isn't it? Because the lost focus you don't need a separate control to handle the lost focus.
Yeah, the only
Correct.
thing is that hiding the control tip text when you tab out of a control, yeah, you can use the lost focus of a command button to hide the control tip text, and you don't need the rectangle behind it. So yeah, there's a bit of tweaking to do if you're using command buttons rather than image controls, but
how easy is it to put images like these on a command button? I know it's
easy.
possible. Is it?
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Is the
Easy peasy,
resizing? Sorry, go ahead, George.
I'm going to say it's easy peasy. You just set your command button to the size you want, put the image on it. Then the label, the label has the accelerator key, the ampersand. And if you set the command button's properties to display the image only, you won't see the label.
I'm just thinking, like, could you have a dual control kind of arrangement where you're using an image and a command button and they're sort of overlapping themselves?
Well, also the disadvantage of using a command button instead of an image control is you do not have the ability to zoom. I mean, your picture's going to be just the same size as the PNG
Correct.
was. So
That's
you
the
have a lot
challenge.
more control over how it looks with the image control.
A command button also, you could use a hybrid solution where you have the image control and you have a command button sitting in front of it that's set to transparent.
Yeah.
In
That's
which case,
that's what I was saying, a hybrid solution combining the two.
so you've got a command button that can actually get the focus. And with Bill's suggestion of having the rectangle around the whole image to show which one actually has the focus. So even though the command button's transparent, it does give an indication of which one has the focus by that rectangle.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
There's a property of the command button.
Transparent.
Yeah.
Background being transparent.
Back style here.
No, under that, transparent.
Yeah, right. This one, right?
Yeah,
do that.
There's also,
and then if you go to if you make it the current, if you give it the selection, it has to be when it's running live rather than in design mode, of course.
No, sure.
yeah, but so you've just made the background transparent, whereas the property just underneath that is the transparent property.
Yep.
But you can see where it is underneath the telephone thing.
Yeah.
So it can get the focus, and it's all its other events fire. It's just that you can't see the button.
Okay.
So if you stick that over the top,
because we haven't tested it yet, have we?
if you stick that over the top of one of your image controls, you've effectively got a button with that nice image behind it.
Yeah.
So the got focus event of that transparent command button would do the same as the mouse over for the image control behind it.
Okay.
In other words, it would show both the rectangle and the tooltip.
One of the many we hope. I have to leave, but I encourage everyone to stick around. And I'd like to remind everyone, we have 2 new chapters starting. We have Italia. Please refer them to your Italian friends. And we have Access Beginners in October, which I'll be heading up initially. Look forward to seeing you guys then. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. And please continue with the discussion.
Thank you, Juan, for coming and visit and enabling this whole Access User Group thing.
Thanks, Juan.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the reason I developed this solution is that over the years, I've been called in by users saying, what does this mean? And I have to say, well, float your mouse above it, and
that particular one there is, I'm praying that this button will actually do something.
Which one? Yeah. Yes, yes. Okay. It's funny because this is actually just borrowed from an application I did in Cambodia, and in Thailand and Cambodia, the way of saying thank you or is whatever
Oh
is.
yeah.
So it's a courtesy icon actually, but it's not perhaps relevant to Westerners.
Well, next month, we're going to be having a bit of a deeper dive into the relationship object model of Access and also SQL Server. Crystal will be showing us how to use VBA to document your relationships and find the hidden indexes that support them. And I'll show you SQL Server system views to do the same with T-SQL. We'll also look at some of the subtle differences between Access and SQL Server relations and dig into some of the undocumented options for relationships. So until next time,